Well, Jason and the board, thank you guys for having us here today. We're BNSF, obviously, we are in lockstep with you guys on the direction you're heading. You know, we think it's all about, you know, this country is driven by cheap energy, whether it's coal, wind, gas. So you guys are all about, you know, continue to expand the natural resources in Wyoming and utilize them, and we're lockstep with that. So thank you for the invitation. And, you know, BNSF is owned by Berkshire Hathaway, so I'm going to talk a little bit, give you a general overview of what's going on at BNSF, and then I'll make it more of a coal-centric discussion. And the speakers this morning took something very difficult, like a clean power plan, and made it simple to understand. I'm going to do the opposite probably, make something very simple like a railroad, very complex. So if there's any questions, please write them down and ask me at the end. I'll try to stick to my 30 minutes so I don't get in the governor's time. But we are owned by Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway owns everything from Geico to Dairy Queen to Fruit of the Loom, so they're a very well integrated company. They own 72 companies. The BNSF is 160 years old, and we are the largest railroad in North America by volume. We've shipped 10 million units a year. The Union Pacific has more track, but we're more productive with our track than they are. So about 10 million is an average year for us. We have 28 states we serve, 3 Canadian provinces. We have 47,000 employees, and most of those employees are people out in the field that are actually working, not overhead like me that come to Jackson Hole and enjoy the nice weather. We have 32,000 route miles, 8,000 locomotives. These locomotives are very expensive, obviously. They're about $2.2 million a pop. So big investment by BNSF to replace our locomotive fleet. The new locomotives are about 15% more fuel efficient than the old locomotives, so fewer breakdowns as well. So we also serve 40 ports, no other North American railway. Can you guys hear me okay? So we serve 40 ports. No other railroad can say that. So we have very good access to all the international markets, both for export and import. And we've invested $53 billion since 2000 in our infrastructure. So we are committed to growing our business. And this chart kind of shows our capital spend, and it really speaks well to our level of commitment to our customers. The last 3 years have been record years for the BNSF for capital spend. In 2013, we spent $4 billion, 14, 5.5, and this year $6 billion. Every year has been a record for the BNSF, and every year we set a record for North American railroads, and all the other roads are also raising their capital spending as well. So as an industry, we're continuing to invest in meeting our customers' demands, and we're also hiring quite a few people. Last year, we hired 7,000 people, so a massive hiring program as well. And if you break down that investment, about $3 billion of it, about half of it just goes to maintain our railroad. You know, it takes a lot of money to keep our railroad maintained where we can run it efficiently and more importantly, safely. That's the most important thing we do is run a safe railroad. But it's about $3 billion a year, and that's just replacing core assets. We spend about $1.4 billion a year on new locomotives and equipment, and mainly locomotives. I talked before about how expensive locomotives are. Last year we bought 600 locomotives, so pretty committed to that. We also spend $1.5 billion on expansion and efficiency. That's been the big delta versus years past, how much money we're spending to grow our business. And so this is, in that counts, 130 miles of double track. You know, that just double track makes sense. It's like a toll road. You don't have many exit or on ramps, so you're able to get more capacity from your railroad. We built 130 miles last year of that. We had 23 additional sidings we built, 800 miles of CTC, which is central traffic control, which basically allows our dispatchers to control the tracks from Fort Worth, and they can throw the switches from Fort Worth. So you don't have crews stopping to throw switches. You don't have crews stopping to talk to dispatchers. The dispatchers just line the switches and the trains go. So that's a big deal for us. We'll be about 90% of our traffic will be running under CTC within a few years, and that just adds capacity to our network. We also spend $200 million on PTC, and I'll talk a little bit more about that lately because there's probably been people who have heard about that, and I'll explain what PTC actually is. So our business this year has actually been kind of flat versus last year. Last year we moved 10 million units. The first half of this year we moved 5 million units, which is actually kind of a big deal. If you look at the other railroads, they're all down considerably, and we're actually flat. We have 4 business units. The largest is our consumer products business unit, and that's all the intermodal stuff. The containers that you see and the vehicles are consumer products, about half our business. And that's down a little bit because we had some port slowdown issues earlier in the year, but that's behind us now. So we have an international business, which is doing a little better now because of the strong dollar, obviously. The American consumer can buy more with the same amount of spending power. So we're seeing our international business grow a little bit. Our domestic business unit, which is where we work with the J.B. Hunt, the Schneiders, the UPSs, the FedExes, to take trucks off the road for the long haul, that's been a big growth component for us. It's going to be a big growth component for us because the average over-the-road truck driver now is 57 years old. And there's more regulatory challenges for truckers. So the trucking companies are reaching out to us, and we only have about 15% of that business as an industry. So tremendous growth in intermodal. Ag is another growing business for us, and it really gets down to it's about 10% of our business. And you know, it's the fertilizer, the grains, the ag products, the ethanol, and we move enough fertilizer to fertilize a field the size of Kansas every year. So we're big in fertilizer. We move enough grain to feed 900 million people all their bread requirements for a year. So we're pretty big there, and you know, we're really blessed by our franchise, and we're blessed that the American farmer continues to become more and more productive every year. So their yields continue to go up, so there's more stuff to move. The Pacific Basin consumer continues to want more and more protein. Their standard of living goes up, so we see big growth in ag. Industrial products is all the crude stuff, the building products, the tank car, the refrigerated product stuff, the steel cars, and that's been down a little bit, and for obvious reasons. Crude has been down. Crude's been a big growth phenomenon for us. You know, we have 7 crude facilities in Wyoming and under 20 in North Dakota, but we've been growing that business pretty significantly. The challenge has been, with crude prices where they're at, really has been the drilling part of it. All the associated products have been down. We move, for every well drilled, we move about 40 cars of pipe and frac sand and clay, and obviously drilling is on its knees right now. So we're actually suffering there, but the crude in of itself hasn't gone down a whole lot. Housing starts are still pretty strong, so our building products are good. Our steel business is really suffering right now because of the strong dollar. It's cheaper to import steel in this country than it is to produce it, and that has impact for all our, you know, we have, example, in Minnesota area, we have a lot of taconite facilities up there that make taconite to make steel. Well, the steel facilities are shutting down because the taconite facilities, the taconite facilities are shutting down because steel facilities are shutting down. So that means the tac facilities aren't buying power. So we're seeing some downstream impact from the lack of steel production in the upper Midwest. Last but not least, coal. Coal is about 23% of our business. It's a core part of our business. It's a very important part of our business. We power about 1 in 10 homes in America are powered by BNSF-powered PRB coal. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. But as far as Wyoming goes, Wyoming is a core state for us. We move about 2 million carloads a year in Wyoming. We move about 222 million tons of coal out of Wyoming every year. That's a lot of coal. We moved into 28 states all over the western United States and eastern United States. We have about 1,400 employees with a payroll of $108 million. So, you know, we're very pivotal. I sound like George Bush now, I'm making up a word. Very pivotal to the Wyoming economy, and they're very important to us. We also see significant investment around rail from our customers in Wyoming. They've spent around $200 million since 2012, so that construction jobs, then jobs downstream. And BNSF has invested close to $250 million in Wyoming in recent years. So a lot of money that's being recycled in the economy right now in Wyoming because of the rail activity. As far as what we move in Wyoming, the top right pie graph is what we actually move from Wyoming, and as you would expect, the gray area is coal, so it's mainly coal. About 1.7 million carloads last year were coal moved out of Wyoming. About 42,000 were industrial, and that's the crude, obviously. We also ship a lot of coal in Wyoming for obvious reasons. About 74,000 cars of coal in the state of Wyoming last year, terminating in Wyoming. And we also move a lot of industrial stuff into Wyoming, and that's primarily the pipe and the frac sand coming in for drilling. But Wyoming, again, just to reiterate, is a very important state for us. 2 million carloads is a lot of cars for BNSF Railway. So I'm not going to spend much time on this slide because it's kind of like preaching to the choir as far as what PRB does, but this is a standard BNSF soapbox for what we have to offer in the PRB, and it's a big deal. I spent a few weeks in the Pacific Rim at different times talking to the buyers, and they recognize this, that we've got 250 years of available coal reserves. It's easy to mine versus other countries. It's consistent quality, and I hear that a lot from especially the Japanese and the Koreans, that they love our quality, they love our consistency. They can't get that in other countries like they can from us, so that's a big selling point. And you know, we've got 10 of the largest mines in the PRB that are already here, so infrastructure is here, the international demand is here. It was just like Jason, I'll talk a little bit more about what Jason was talking about on the whole why we need the export terminals developed, but you know, the key message is we've got the coal here, you guys know that. And the other selling point that I don't talk about, it's 60% lower in sulfur than most other coals in the U.S., so obviously that's a big selling point. And back to BNSF, we're the largest mover of coal in the United States. We moved about 270 million tons last year, and we moved about 62% of the PRB coal that was moved. So we are the largest mover of PRB coal, obviously. And if you look at where that goes, this is a density chart. The thicker the line, the more the coal traffic moves on that line. Obviously, it's primarily going to the east, going through Lincoln to Kansas, the Kansas area, to Chicago, to the southeast. We also move quite a bit down to Texas, to the ERCOT market. You know, obviously a very gas competitive market. The new line on here is the stuff going to the West Coast. That, if you look at this line 3 or 4 years ago, it wouldn't even register, and now you can actually see it on there. So our goal is to get some terminals built and make that line a lot thicker, because obviously the lines to the east are going to be challenged with the clean power plan. So if you look at historical tons moved on the BNSF for coal, 2008 was our banner year, just under 300 million tons. This year, last year we moved about 270 million tons. 2015, we're going to move about 270 million tons. So this year is going to look a lot like last year. And really the reason being is that we had a pretty significant weather event last year. So everybody's been rebuilding their inventories this year. So we're off to a pretty good start this year. The rest of the year is going to tail off quite a bit with gas at 250, and inventory is very healthy. But we've had a good start this year, so we think we're going to finish the year about the same as this year. But you know, the problem obviously going forward is just with what was talked about earlier this morning is obviously there's going to be a lot of power plants that are not going to be here in 2 and 5 and 10 years. So it's hard to imagine how we're going to keep this volume up. And you know, we're optimistic on some of the power plants that are left that they're going to increase their capacity factor. So we also have a few plants that we're targeting for PRB conversion. So we actually see some green shoots out there. The bad news, obviously, is a lot of the smaller, older plants are going to be shutting down, and that makes it even more important from our standpoint to really develop a plan B, which is the export market. And this graph you guys have seen before, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it because Joe's going to talk tomorrow with more expertise than I can, but we have historically moved a lot of coal east as well to Superior, Wisconsin. We moved about 2 million tons last year. That was put in a Laker to go to the Port of Quebec, where it's put in a Cape vessel to go to both to Europe and the UK, and I think we actually moved some down to Chile from there, believe it or not, around the Horn. So interesting move there. But obviously our bread and butter is the West Coast for export. We have an export facility at Ridley today in northern BC. The challenge with Ridley is that we have to go over 3 railroads to get there, and it's about an extra 1,000 miles versus Vancouver. So it's just, with world coal prices where they're at, it's just a struggle for us to make that competitive right now. Longer term, when coal prices appreciate, the mechanism's there, and we'll start moving coal there again. Today we're not. The big facility we serve is West Shore in Vancouver, British Columbia. We move about 11, 12 million tons a year there. Their number 2 and number 3 customers now are U.S. coal companies, so they've embraced getting more U.S. coal there. We serve it direct. We're very efficient there. You know, you look at West Shore, they're spending $270 million in the next 3 years in a capital project. So they're basically reinvigorating their entire terminal, bigger belts, bigger ship loaders, bigger stacker reclaimers. So they're spending a lot of money, and we think that they're going to work their capacity up to 35, 36 million tons a year. So we think we'll have more capacity there. But as far as the terminals under development, they're, you know, obviously the permitting challenges that Jason talked about are the kind of the bottleneck. There's one that's already permitted at FSD, which is in Vancouver. Smaller terminal. There's the big one is obviously Gateway Pacific Terminal and Millennium Terminal. Again, Joe talked about Gateway Pacific Terminal tomorrow, but it's just south of the Canadian border. Millennium is a terminal in Longview, Washington, which could be, you know, you look at, I was actually in Longview 3 or 4 weeks ago with Ken and the board. And, you know, it's a great story there. If you look at Longview, it's actually a very depressed economic area with the paper mill shutting down, the aluminum smelters closing down. The city of Longview wants development. So it really is, you look at the city there and the county, they want this terminal to be built. So it really is kind of refreshing to see, and Ken worked many years on developing that, but it really is great to see you know, an area that wants development and wants a coal terminal. So we're optimistic that Millennium Terminal project will continue to push forward, and you know, that can be over 40 million tons there, and we serve that direct very efficiently. So we think there's great opportunity there, but it all gets down to permitting. And you know, I think everybody in this room thinks that permits by and large are a good thing, and we should be very transparent and above board and follow the rules, and there should be some accountability on permits. But obviously our challenge is whenever one group can hijack the permitting process because they don't like carbon, or they don't like commerce, they don't like railroads, or pick it, they don't like GMOs. There's all kinds of reasons people block rail expansion. Whenever they can block a permit because of that, you know, there's something wrong with the process. And you know, our CEO, Matt Rose, is on President Obama's Jobs Council, or was, and I think that's 45 or 50 CEOs. His biggest issue that Matt backed with Obama was, you know, the permitting process has got to change in the United States. If you're after shovel-ready projects, if you really want to grow commerce in the United States, you got to have a reasonable permitting process that works, that can't be held hostage. And because we also have that in our projects. We have some big development projects that aren't coal related that we're seeing some major resistance to as well. So again, Joe can talk more about that tomorrow. So as far as positive train, and I guess the only other thing I want to mention real quickly, you know, the reason that we want these export terminals built, we've got the supply here. Even the most conservative estimates show there's going to be another 700, 800 million tons of demand in the Pacific Rim. So the coal's got to come from somewhere, and we've got the cleanest, most consistent quality coal here in the United States. So we believe that it's a natural that we should be the supplier of that and help create jobs at home. But it really gets down to, can you get the permitting? So positive train control. PTC, it's a federal mandate now that all railroads have to have PTC, and it's been in the news a little bit. So I thought I would mention it real quickly so you guys were familiar with it. But the PTC system really is meant to keep a train from going where it's not supposed to be, and it's a very complex system. we're having to build all these new cellular towers and equip all our locomotives with special GPS equipment. And basically it keeps trains from running into each other. It keeps trains from going into territories they shouldn't be in. It keeps them from going too quickly. It keeps them from going in territories where there's people on the ground. So, at the end of the day, it's a very valuable thing. It's going to cost about $2 billion for BNSF alone to do it. But, we're committed to doing it. And at the end of the day, it's going to help run a safer railroad. But, there's just a lot of news about right now because you hear about the oddball oil train explosion or commuter rail accident. And so there's been a lot of press about this. So not everybody's familiar with PTC, so I at least wanted to introduce it real quickly. And the last slide, environmental benefits. Got in every rail presentation with environmental benefits because if you're an environmentalist, you ought to love the railroad. If you're a green person, you ought to love I sound like Donald Trump now. You got to love us, right? But we move a ton of freight 500 miles on a single gallon of fuel. That's a big deal. For every intermodal train we move, we take 280 trucks off the highways, which is a big deal from a congestion standpoint and from an emission standpoint. So, can you imagine having, we run hundreds and hundreds of intermodal trains a day. Can you imagine having 300 more trucks on the road for every train that we don't run? It's just impossible to think about in areas like Chicago and LA and Seattle to have that kind of traffic on the highway. And also BNSF leads the industry in development of green technology. And a lot of that is, we're continuing to explore natural gas locomotives. All our intermodal facilities are now all electric. So, we're being very environmentally friendly there. And so as a company, I guess, we're committed to continuing to sell the benefits of rail and the benefits of BNSF. And again, I guess I just want to close on that. We really appreciate the discussion this morning. I think, it's difficult to take the emotion out of some of these arguments. I think you guys did a great job of it, and just throw the facts out there and look for a solution for the technology and for the regulatory challenges and for the permitting challenges. I think you guys did a great job of taking some of the emotion out of it, and I certainly applaud that, and we are aligned with you guys on that. So with that, I have time for questions, Jason?
You do. All right. Thank you, Brett. Ken?
First, Brett, I just want to say thanks to BNSF for all the support they gave Millennium during the permitting process while I was there for the 3 years that I was there. It was quite helpful, and I know that's still ongoing today. I do have two questions. Can you talk about the implementation of positive train control with regard to some of the regulatory requirements that are out there?
Sure.
And could you also talk about what things you go through in taking a unit train of coal across the Canadian border?
Sure.
That might be different from other shipments in the U.S.?
Sure. So as far as PTC goes, in 2008, Congress passed a law that said all the railroads by the end of 2015 have to have PTC implemented. We are the only railroad that's even close to doing that, and we're not going to be able to do it. One of the challenges we had was you have to build, I talked about these cell towers you have to build, all these radio towers, because we don't have radio coverage good enough to locate where our trains are within a couple of feet like we need it. So we have to ensure that we have that, and we also have to equip all our locomotives with new devices. But the radio towers, the FCC gives us permits for doing that, and they withheld permits for 18 months. And so we got one arm of the government saying you had to do this, and you have another arm of the government saying we're not going to give you the permits to build the radio towers. So that delayed us quite a bit. The standards that they have for PTC were also delayed quite a bit, so we didn't know what we were building for. Sounds familiar, right? Like the discussion this morning. So there's been some delays in getting PTC implemented, and you also have to have interoperability between the different railroads. So that's been a challenge to get all the railroads to work together because we all think that we're the smartest guy in the room, right? So you get all the major railroads working together to see what PTC should look like, and that's been a little bit of a challenge as well. But we're asking Congress for a delay in implementation. We believe we can get it done sooner than the other railroads, but we're asking for a delay, and it's because of again, the permitting on the cell phone, on the radio towers, and the other things I mentioned. As far as Canadian trains, it's actually fairly transparent now. The trains move in bond, which, there's some customs issues that we have to have. All the trains are physically inspected before they go over the border, and before the empties come back over the border, they're physically inspected. So trains, we do see some delays every now and then when some of the paperwork, the in-bond paperwork isn't correct. We see some delays. Whenever there's a load in a coal train coming back, the whole train just has to stop, and we're waking up border people in the middle of the night to clear customs on a loaded car, or we have to get another crew there just to kick out the loaded car. So there are some nuances from going into Canada, but by and large, Ken, it's actually been, I think we've been at it long enough now that it's fairly, day to day, it's a fairly easy process for us to get over the border. There's been a lot of resistance in some of the Canadian towns to U.S. coal. And so, we built a spray station in Pasco, Washington. And a spray station basically is all the mines today have to apply a topping agent to the coal whenever it's loaded. So we built a spray station in Pasco, Washington, and all the export coal goes by. $25 million that we spent to go above and beyond and making sure that we're good partners for the state of Washington and keeping coal dust in the car. We believe that what's done at the mine today is already sufficient and it works. So it's just another layer of redundancy, but it shows our commitment to the export business that we did that. But that's been something that it's been a little bit different than other lanes that we've had to do. David.
Brett, always good to see you. When
Howdy.
you come here, it's remarkable that how important the transportation piece of all of our commodity-based businesses really are, and the huge role that our railroads play in that. So, we've heard some speakers talking about, some pretty doomsday-ish scenarios from a coal perspective. By 2027, no more coal plants operating in the U.S. is kind of one operational scenario. As you guys are looking at your long-term planning, and you take a look at the amount of business you have today with coal, what are some of y'all's strategic thought about what alternatives are of interest to you in terms of, seeing carbon dioxide or just carbon assets to replace coal in the event that the coal trains, the way they're configured now, go away? Or do y'all have some vision and strategy of what those may be looking like that you can share with us?
Well, I guess just general statement is we want all the business to grow in all 4 business units. So, whether coal goes away or coal doesn't go away, we're going to aggressively grow all our business. We're actually working with our customers right now, David, on what the long-term plan looks like for them, and there's still a lot of uncertainty about which plants, because they don't know yet. They don't know which plants they're going to keep and which ones they're not. There's probably some transparency next 3 years or so. So we've got some ideas for plant closures next 2 or 3 years, and most of those have been announced. But none of us really know the magnitude of what's actually going to happen in 2020 and 2030 with these magic cutoff lines. If you look at what you just said, in 2030, there's not going to be any coal burn. We don't believe that's going to happen. We believe coal is going to continue to have a place in the blend, and we do see the base plants that are left. We see them running more full out. You have a lot of these big plants now that their capacity factor is 65%. And as more and more power generation is taken out of the grid, and as you have more and more renewables, you're going to need more and more base load. So we see the plants that are left running 75% plus, and we're going to be working with the customers on that. But as far as replacing coal, I don't think we have a plan to replace coal, but I do think we're going to continue to grow crude, and the domestic intermodal and the ag are 3 big growth businesses for us. And we're very blessed with those 4 business units because we're kind of hedged. As one goes down, another one seems to be up, which is sometimes bad news, right? Because a year and a half ago, they all were up at the same time, the perfect storm. record crop, record crude prices, record cold weather.
Let me try to be a little bit more specific. Are you seeing any customers talk to you about, I need some special trains to transport carbon dioxide because I don't want to build a pipeline for enhanced oil recovery? Or is there anything like that on the drawing board that people are talking to you guys about?
Probably so, but I'm not familiar with it. I'm not real involved in that. So I can ask around and get back to the board on that, but I just don't know.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right.
Well, all right. Well, thank you very much, Brett, for